It's the 30th day of January 2024. Welcome, everybody. I hope you had a great day.
Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat, nuclear's trick disguised as clean.
It always takes me a minute to get up to bashing speed. Hello, everybody. I'm going to sneak in the show tonight. It's not going to be a full show. I've said that before, and turns into a full show anyway, but I'm pretty burnt out. What you're looking at, let me explain this to you, because you call, so it takes about 80 tons of coal to equal the energy, he says, of each of those pellets. Of course, if those pellets were gone through a chain reaction, he couldn't get close enough to pick them up. He would die right away. But that's they put that picture there. It's meant to manipulate people into thinking that it's safe, right? It's a subconscious thing. But in order to get that pellet, I have to zoom in on this one instead. In order to get I thought I had one there, but I guess I don't. Here we go. Well, let's do it this way instead. Just pop myself in there. So they got a mined an absurd amount. So they say each of those pellets is equal to 80 tons of coal, but each of those pellets takes probably 200 tons of coal to produce it. That single pellet. It goes through a whole process where they use harsh chemicals to extract the uranium-308, the yellow cake, from, because you crush everything up like it's sand, right? So it's an enormous, you're talking about an enormous amount of material, a couple of hundred tons, and so you got to use a lot of chemicals. You can't just use a bucket of chemicals on a couple of hundred tons of crushed up ore. It's a lot of chemicals. By the way, those chemicals are always evaporated into the environment, destroying your loved ones, your children's health, which are developing, right? Your children are developing, and so this is the worst thing that can happen to any species of young ones, let alone humans. Yellow cake is turned into UO2 and then a gas. The pellets are put into a fuel rod. That whole process it's unbelievably contaminating for the local communities, the water tables, the food, the farms. It goes through the whole thing. The fuel rods made into pellets. The gas is enriched to decrease the amount of uranium-235. Like, it's a massive it's the most resource-intensive industry on top of that. It goes through all of this process, and it's hard to appreciate the enormity of what I'm talking about. After about 14 months, they're going to take it out of the reactor core because it's very fragile. Trillions and trillions of microscopic cracks that allows the anthropogenic man-made radiation to hemorrhage out of these cracks. And there's nothing on the planet with not only trigger to defend against this stuff. And it irks me to no end whenever I see that statement that there's each pellet is equal to, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, which has no sovereignty over any country. It can't put anybody in jail, can't give anybody a fine. It lives on handouts from the countries that it usurped. And for instance, Japan is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency. That made enormous amounts of money. And when it breaks down, the radioactive fallout covers the entire planet right away. And gas, oil, and coal emissions, which is carbon, has no adverse side effects whatsoever. You can't have puppies or trees or plants or animals or whales or birds or anything without carbon. You can't exist without carbon. If you have no carbon, we look like the moon. Whereas radiation, the plumes will cover the entire planet. And in North America, Canada, United States, this was a study out of Ottawa, Canada. It doesn't matter. You could have done it anywhere on the planet. You would have got the same. I'm sorry, this study was the French study, the French government study. And it was 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. After 16 days, this covered Canada, the United States. After 30 days, covered the entire planet. And so this poisoned everything on the planet, without exception. Has Fukushima perpetual radioactive fallout devastated the future of 8 million species and all of humanity forever? Yes, it has. It has changed the course of history. And it wasn't just Fukushima, clearly, right? The emissions have been going on from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide with decades of reactor cores stored into them. Atoms for peace pellets. That's hilarious. Look, you see the building to your left. The official story is that never happened, even though it did, obviously, clearly. That's reactor 4 at Fukushima. That's one of the 4 reactors that melted down. And the International Atomic Energy Agency and the world media and the World International, the nuclear associations, all the lobbying groups, denied that happened. But the consequences of it is catastrophic. And this is just a fraction of the medias that have come out. The studies that quantify what they're going to be eating the food from the nuclear wasteland were done on external doses, weren't done on internal doses, despite the fact there was an enormous amount of documentation. There was 13,646 children with thyroid tumors of around 2 centimeters. The adult thyroid is about 3 by 5 centimeters. The child is only around 2 centimeters, which means they're going to be producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life, particularly for the most vulnerable part of their life, the development of, they don't stop developing until they're around 25 years old. And so that's the worst thing can happen to them. Now, pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million. This was 35.8%, which is, when you scale it up to a million, it's 358,000 out of a million. There's many other studies, congenital malformations, congenital heart problems for neonates and infants per 100,000 live births across Japan. It's 14.2%. And so what they're doing is they're getting heart surgery. And you can look up the documentary Chernobyl Heart, and that'll give you some more insight of what I'm talking about there, because a lot of this is really complicated, but it's not if you do a little bit of research. And when you're talking about these types of numbers, because pre-Fukushima was 1 in a million, now it's 358,000 out of a million, but that's 2012. There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. 865,000 excess cancers, a spike in the first year. Now, not everybody got health care. Not everybody's going to be diagnosed. Right, so 865,000 cancers in the first year. And cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury or illness. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. The first studies they're doing after a nuclear event for years is going to be autism and Down syndrome. What does that tell us? Because they know they're going to find that, and so they can get funding to do that. So a lot of people died immediately after, thousands of miles away. So if you think because you're in Canada or you're in Greenland or you're in Tuktonuktut or you're in wherever, you were sadly mistaken. And that the academics are only doing studies on external because they can't get money for internal doses. But these studies are then used to justify moving the most vulnerable of society into a nuclear wasteland, and they will be studied like lab rats for their entire life. And it's like Nagasaki, Hiroshima, where they took around 4,000 victims back to Los Alamos National Laboratories and other institutions, national laboratories in the United States, and ashed their remains to sniff for plutonium, uranium, and other isotopes. They burnt them, they incinerated them, because you can't destroy radiation by incineration, see? But they do love destroying the children, don't they? 20 atoms a kilogram, 11 atoms a kilogram, children will start to see serious heart problems. 20 atoms, and that's what a Becquerel is, a pulse of energy. It's usually described as a BQ, but Becquerel's is typical. The abbreviation is BQ, which is the explosion every second, and that can go on for millions of years every second from each anthropogenic man-made atom. And they can be prosecuted under the racketeering statutes. Let me get this back to my normal page first off, because I'll forget where I'm to in a minute. So let's come back over to the big page. So it's a little bit easier for anybody on small devices or laptops or tablatures or phones to be, hopefully can read it. These criminals can be prosecuted under the racketeering statutes. And every country has a version of the racketeering statutes. So the pro-nuclear community will come out and claim that it's equal to smoking cigarettes. Or the craziest one I've ever heard, this was Dr. Robert Gale. That's him there, actually, Robert Gale. And now what he does transplants. He radiates your loved ones till all their cells are dead. And then he's going to try to stick an arm and a leg on them. And the idea is not to come up with a solution. The idea is to kill your loved ones. That's why they have to sign a waiver saying they can't be held liable. Right? There's no indemnity. Kayaking for 15 minutes. I thought that was the lowest. Now, this statement here, you see those numbers he's talking about, completely fabrications, by the way. This is what he told the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society working at Fukushima. This was a Neptunium-239 dispersal after 20 days. This is just 20 days of radioactive fallout. This was based on 30 days. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms. This study was out of Ottawa, Canada. It was funded from Ottawa, Canada, the institutions. It's got a 15 million year half-life. It's never going away. This is per liter, and this was sustained. Transported rapidly to Canada, United States. Elevated levels continued for many months. Well, with a 15 million year half-life, it's going to continue for 150 million years because there's 10 half-lives. But there's many other isotopes acknowledged, and in the abundance of them should never escape your reality. You got 1 million atoms of xenon-133. It'll burn a hole through your lung and end up in your bones. 20 million particles. Particles are way worse, infinitely worse than the physical atoms. They're the result of 9,000 degree Fahrenheit infernos, nuclear infernos, reactor cores, cannibalizing steel and rebar and whatever, because at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, that stuff is just like, it's like pouring butter into a lava. It's atomized in aerosol, ionized and radiated, and we describe it as particles. And they can travel very long distances. They're very harmful. And the iodine-131, for every 131, there's 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129, which is a separate study. Separate study. And at the 132, 133, which are 10 and 30 times more produced per each of the iodine-131, are 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of all the species. And particularly children. We have to protect the female species of this planet at all costs, because the radioactive fallout sterilizes. And the big studies after, say, Chernobyl, they'd done studies on Europe, sex ratio studies, to see they were looking for a discrepancy of more males than females, and which means less population, right? Less births, less chance of a future. And because they know this is the result of it, and that's what they're looking for. They're not going to find it, and they want to see how bad it is. That's one of the many, many ways they'll quantify that. There's multiple reactors, 4 reactors completely, and 8 fuel pools, 2 fuel pools at the top of each building with decades of reactor cores. It makes Chernobyl look like a paper towel, and Chernobyl's not a paper towel. Remember, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom for decades after Chernobyl, which is 3,000 kilometers away. Because, it's not like a banana, it's not like a potato chip, it's not like walking in sunshine. And we had launched many, many research expeditions for many years doing species counts, and I was demonized. I still am. And they find a new way to demonize me every other day, it seems. I don't hide away from anybody. And so I get really frustrated whenever I hear the propaganda machine talking about how one of those pellets has enough energy, which, even if it's true, they can only get about 3% of the energy out of it because it's so fragile. At that point, they have to take it out of the reactor core and store it for 1 billion years. So just because they got, and I'm not saying they actually do, but just let's say it does have the same energy as 80 tons of coal would have, you can only get about 3% of it because it becomes so fragile in the zirconium cladding, you can't leave it in the reactor. It'll melt down, and then you won't be able to use the reactor or that part of your country. Japan TV host, ex-Smack pop idol, he quit show business amid of a scandal. For alleged blah 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 misconduct. What they were doing were they were setting up women who worked like the new Sally Ann's that worked there, the temporary workers, female workers, and they would have these large lunch gatherings every once in a while where the big TV state. This is a big TV, Fuji TV, I think, Fuji TV, and the people that that the staff learned to trust, that was organizing it, and when they said you can show up here and there's going to be a dinner, and there's always the dinner, it's always paid for by the company and everything else, they would approach the Sally Ann's and they would set up these dinners, but nobody would show up, only their little rock stars. And then it was non-consensual activity. Non-consensual. You know what that means, right? Forced. But for the media to come out and frame it that way, this is why the world is in so much trouble, because you do that with everything, particularly with nuclear. And she got a $575,000 US out of court settlement, which means she can't tell her story. Without specifically mentioning what happened, Nakai said in his message to his fans, his gullible fans, that he takes full responsibility and offering apologies to. Now we're talking about the Japanese culture, which is a real degenerate culture. Another well-known TV personality went into hiatus in January 2024 after the Shuka Bunshu, whatever that is, reported that he allegedly forced several women into activities in 2015. The case is sowing suspicion on commercial broadcasters as a whole. So it turns out that there was a major blowback. Because if you only read one story, you generally only get the control opposition. You got to start reading a bunch of stories. But this one turned out to be really good. TV host scandal exposes the dark underbelly of Japanese media. Dark is not the proper word for it. Sadistic monsters, I think, is more appropriate. Has exposed systematic governance and abuse issues among Japanese broadcaster causing public disenchantment. The right word would have been horror. These are criminals assaulting vulnerable people that went and got an incredible education to go work there, are not part of the team, are not going to play ball, so they're considered this is like people that, like, when it comes to the media, the majority, not everybody in the media wants to tell lies to the population, and so those are singled out and abused and driven out of the industry. It really is a cult. Disenchantment with the media industry that will likely be difficult to overcome. The fallout from the scandal surrounding Rose fame has already led to over 70 Japanese companies pulling ads from Fuji TV, as well as the resignation of 2 of the broadcaster's top executives. Clearly, this has been going on for a very long time, and is very prolific. Major networks, including Nippon Television Network Corporation, Tokyo Broadcasting System Incorporation, TV, Asani Corporation, Tokyo Corporation TV, have launched investigations to uncover whether similar incidences have occurred within their organization. I mean, there's not a child in the school down there that's safe. The Japanese culture is bizarre. It's just bizarre. It's like 6 out of 10 teachers are barred from going to school because they're predatory upon the little students. Despicable. The controversy stems from a report made by Weekly Magazine in December, which alleged that a meal for a group of people, and this is how they do it, right? Allegedly, there's a meal for a group of people arranged by Fuji TV employee, ended up with only Nakai and his unnamed female victim present, leading to non-consensual activities and an out-of-court payment. Fuji TV, which apparently felt immediately actions were unwarranted, is absurd. The whole story is absurd. They're literally the worst humans on the planet. And this is what you get when you have no checks and balances and generations of inbreeding. You got this monster that is, who knows how many thousands of women were preyed on in these institutions, these so-called medias. They're far cries from medias, aren't they? Has faced criticism for its response. It was only forced to act after the U.S. fund Dalton Investments, a shareholder of the broadcaster's parent company, Fuji Media Holding Corp., issued a letter on January 14th of this year requesting the establishment of a third-party committee to investigate, which means some of them are going to jail. So a couple of top ones clearly were going to go to jail, so they resigned early. The endless scandal comes as Japan's entertainment industry, which is entertainment for who, I wonder, has been hit by multiple revelations of predatory-related scandals, including accusations of years of abuse by Johnny Kitagawa, the founder of the male talent agency formerly known as Johnny and Associates, that pushed Mac and other groups to stardom. They're all predators. And the industry needs that because they're predators too. The whole story is absurd, isn't it? Well, the network said its employees was not involved in setting up the meal in which the woman Nakai. It came to light that then Fuji TV president had allowed Nakai to continue appearing on programs despite being aware of the allegations against him and paying out-of-court settlements of over $500,000 US. Right, because they got a lot of really nasty stuff on each other, right? They all participated in this. He just was the one who got caught. He was the sacrificial lamb, most likely, I should say. Fuji TV held its first press conference on the Nakai matter on January 17, but was criticized for limiting the number of participants, and nobody was allowed to use cameras. No filming, no audios. Fuji TV. They're the media, which is supposed to be very open. They're the media. They're telling everybody else. They're criticizing everybody else. We're the media. You got to be open with us. And when it comes to them, their turn, they won't let people film them. So that blew up in their face. I mean, my goodness, right? As well as for its evasive answers. So not only would they not let people film them, limit the number of participants to the friendly ones, so to speak, and then even then had evasive answers. But that blew up in their face. Minato justified the decision not disclose the incidents in consideration of the woman's physical and mental recovery, as well as the protection of her privacy. So how many times have they protected the victim? Point. This is the opposite. Like they've run probably 10,000 stories on people that done this to somebody else somewhere else. But when it happened at their TV station, which clearly was ongoing for a long time, they took the immoral ground. On Monday, Fuji TV held a second press conference on the issue, during which it announced the resignation of Minato and the chairman. And this was a 10-hour televised press conference. They could have just done the original press conference and got it over with. Now they've done a 10-hour press conference. Basically, the reason they kept it so long was because they were trying to get the advertisers to come back, which was open and attended by over 400 participants. It was open. Anybody can go, and attended by over 400 participants. 10-hour press conference. After they wouldn't let anybody even film them and wouldn't answer any question. Failed to shed further light on the issue still, even though they had a 10-hour press conference on their TV station, trying to be public all of a sudden. It also failed to persuade advertisers that had pulled their ads from the network to return. Because we're not getting the whole story in North America, I can tell you that much. Fuji TV handling of the situation highlighted that a culture of unaccountability remains. Let's see how we're doing on the poll here. How we doing? Has Fukushima perpetual radioactive fallout devastated the future of the 8 million species and all of humans? It's interesting because they're doing this show. We've been doing this show over a decade. Well over a decade. And we got 13 people on our show on the last day of the week. We got 12 likes. 30 minutes in the show on the last day of the week. That's it. Like the censorship for the last 4 years have been absurd. I got 11 votes, 12 likes, and this is this particular, like years and years ago I covered other topics, right? But this is by far the most demanding topic to cover nuclear, because nuclear is not very forgiving. You're not allowed to make a Freudian slip, for goodness sakes, or it gets chopped up and used to come out and bludgeon you and seed doubt, right? Plant seeds of doubt in people. Oh, well, Dana doesn't know what he's talking about. Listen to this here, right? Because you can make a Freudian slip when you're as prolific as I am on this subject. I've done over 600 radio interviews. I did 6 years of 4 to 5 months on the ocean from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska by myself. We documented everything with GPS, doing the whole coastline from Vancouver to Alaska. 4 to 5 months a year where they're coming back home. It was brutal expeditions in desperation to find out. And all I can muster up is 12, 13 people. And the most important subject in human history on top of that. It's really something. Well, as long as we got a few of the regulars here, because we love you folks so much, and a few policymakers, investors, we win. And that's exactly who's going to find us, right? But I mean, there's probably a lot more watching. It's just the numbers are censored. The total numbers are censored. I mean, my show last night was an incredible good show. And we got 130 views in 24 hours. Like it's utter desperation. They got no one to pick on top of that. But it's utter desperation that nobody finds us and listens to the conversation, right? It's 100% desperation is what you're seeing. Yeah, 136 views last night. I've never seen anything like it. The last couple of months, the censorship is even more insidious. If I was wrapping shit on a stick to call it fertilizer, there'd be 30,000 people here yucking it up, right? Like, I know this is a difficult subject for people to wrap their minds around. That's why I put decades of work into providing you with a format so you can get educated. Anybody is what I'm talking about, right? Not the regulars, obviously, they're already educated. But those who don't know what's going on, when you watch one or two of these presentations, by the time you get through it all, they got a really good handle on it. We don't rush anything. We're very thoughtful. Fukushima Council faces scandal amid investigations. Fukushima Council. This is a prefecture where they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation but didn't stop growing food. And Canada removed all the restrictions on the importations from the nuclear wasteland after 93 days, while 55 countries banned the food for a decade. So what do you think happened? It's almost impossible to find someone down here that's not obese. It's 95% of the population or something is obese here. Because Japan, that's true across Canada. The United States is 74% because of Fukushima fallout. And obesity after a nuclear event is a sign of a marker of radiation brain damage. Allegations of harassment spark a debate over local governance responsibilities, misinformation, ramifications. Allegations of power harassment. No, Japan is a disgusting country. It's a despicable country. And they're just sinking their own ship. I mean, 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Cancer, not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. It's not the only illness or disease this radiation causes by far. And it's usually latent, right? There's 13,636 children out of 38,000 with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. And that's about the size of a kid's thyroid, which makes hormones. So they're all making, the whole country's making radioactive hormones. And then by proxy, that means they're making radioactive stem cells for the rest of their lives, developing lives on top of that, the most important facet of their lives. Japan to take steps to protest the United Nations call, and the United Nations, now I'm not taking Japan's side, but United Nations, I despise these creatures. Eisenhower described them as a military-industrial complex, right? Just bear with me one moment, please. I have a lot of losses. I lose a lot of battles before I win a battle. And all of the stuff I do is a battle, right? Well, Greenpeace gets everything they could ever dream of, and they're a public relation firm, right? The two people that started it up are both the biggest public relation firms on the planet, and they're not good people. Here we go. So, United Nations, according to Eisenhower, is a military-industrial complex. According to George Bush Sr., is the New World Order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
That's pretty despicable. So he calls them a New World Order multiple times. UN is the New World Order, right? They're the military-industrial complex, 195 military. But the average person thinks there's something good for, because the propaganda has been, I mean, when you look, if you go back and look at the 50s and the 60s, because they've been around a long time. They've been around before that. They were the League of Nations, pre-Nagasaki, Hiroshima. And after that, they changed the name. It's the same organization, the same group of crazies. The Japanese government on Wednesday announced countermeasures against the United Nations Committee on Discrimination Against Women that has called for reviewing Japan's male-only imperial succession law. Think about that. The United Nations is dictating the monarchy of a sovereign country, and they have no authority over any country. Let me see. Alright. I'm going to play a little clip here for you. Just give me a second to set it up. This was Obama at United Nations. This is a short clip. He basically says people are too stupid. Well, listen to him. You're smart enough to figure it out. Come on, Dana.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build. Ordinary men and women are too small-minded to govern their own affairs. That order and progress can only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign.
That's an insane statement. Let's try that one more time. I screwed it up a bit.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build. Ordinary men and women are too small-minded to govern their own affairs. That order and progress can only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign.
The reason Canada has a Bill of Rights, America has constitutions, the United Kingdom has the Magna Carta. These are to protect you from organizations and speech like that. People are too small-minded. Well, they were so small-minded they voted him in. They weren't too small-minded when he got voted in, I guess, were they? But you know what I mean, right? The whole bloody thing is insane. The whole bloody thing is insane. And the reason is because people they're so interested in self-gratification. They're so caught up. They're so caught up in the propaganda. A lot of people they watch TV. A lot of people still watch TV. I know Trump is going to let podcasters become part of the media. If you're an so-called influencer or a major podcaster, you got to do a Secret Service check, background check on you. But you can get a White House pass. I can get a White House pass. And so I'm thinking about applying for it. I'm not going to go down there clearly, but I'm thinking about applying for it just so they got to have a little look at me. I know they know who I am. Because they're looking at geothermal really heavy, right? Let's keep going here. So United Nations usurping a monarchy in Japan. And so Japan donates $130,000 a year. Well, Japan is the third biggest donor to the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is UN, of course. And they donate also $130,000 to the UN Human Rights Office. And for the last 20 years, that wasn't used for the Human Rights Office, which is $2.6 million. But how many other countries were donating that amount each year? See? What does a nuclear renaissance mean for uranium mining in Saskatchewan? And this was a bozo, the moron, Drew Anderson. Canadians are just... The majority of the Canadian media, Canadians in general, well, one time of media, of course, right? Time of media and universities are pretty worthless people. Well, they look like people, but I don't think calling them people is appropriate. What does a nuclear renaissance? What are you talking about? Last year, 2024, there's 660 gigawatts of renewables of solar came online, which is equal to 700 large nuclear power plants, each one capable of powering 1 million homes and businesses. Came online in 12 months. There's less reactors coming online, and there's more going offline every single year. So you can't call it a nuclear renaissance. You call it a solar renaissance, but not a nuclear renaissance. The nuclear renaissance is meant to encourage people to buy stocks in small modular reactors, which don't exist. And after 80 years, if they don't exist now, they're not going to. And in the last couple of years, we've seen close to 100 new companies show up with small modular reactors, all of them with their own so-called designs. So there's no consensus. And none of them are actually putting applications into the regulatory agencies for licenses. But Drew didn't write this story. This is a really complicated story. I looked at his other story. He's way too stupid to write a story like this. This was written by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and then one of the public relation firms. They're a huge organization. There's Unsclear and IRPA and the IPRC. There's many subsidies of nuclear with the international, or with the degenerate military industrial complex UN. Saskatchewan is home to the world's largest high-grade uranium deposit key to nuclear power. And the government is eager to attract mining companies. Why do you need to attract them? You got 80 years under your belt. They need to track them because there's no nuclear renaissance, see? Nuclear power has seen a global resurgence. What are you talking about? There's less reactors coming online every year than is going offline, so clearly it's not a nuclear renaissance. They don't have the supply chain worldwide. They don't have the manpower worldwide to produce a nuclear renaissance. There's only a couple of companies that are building it besides the Russians. And they're over, like Britain, EDF, the French government is building Britain's reactors. They don't build their own reactors, for instance. They're like $40 billion over budget, and they're 12 years behind schedule for a single reactor. if that's a nuclear renaissance, then there's no carbon-free future without nuclear power, said the Canadian conservative leader that might be the prime minister in the near future. There's no carbon-free future. You can't. Every nuclear power plant needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to power it. You can't put that in the category as carbon-free. Anything putting power to 1 million homes and businesses every day is not going to be carbon-free. And carbon-free being gas, oil, and coal. And carbon's good. The byproduct gas, oil, and coal is good. It makes carbon. That means more trees, more insects, more plants, more food, more animals. It's good. Less carbon means less life. Nuclear is it really is global warming, and it's caused by 80 years of emissions and a pulse event known as Fukushima. Federal conservative leader says there's no carbon-free future without nuclear power. That's just a physical and mathematical fact. Well, clearly it's not a physical or a mathematical fact. But then you can count on the bird-brained, despicable so-called journalists, the piss for brains, to regurgitate whatever. Now, he didn't write it clearly, right? But he signed his name to it. He's not capable of writing something like this. These are very complicated stories. Even Rod Adams is probably too stupid to write something like that, and he's pretty evil. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith said nuclear power is key to providing reliable and affordable power. It's the most expensive resource in human history. It's the most time-consuming. It consumes all the precious metals. Just the new reactor they're building in the United Kingdom, a single one, produced more concrete. You can build a sidewalk all the way to Rome and back from Great Britain. It's the biggest project in history on top of that. To call something like that carbon-free is the lowest. They can't quantify those types of assertions at all. You simply can't quantify it. And they know that. They're not naive. They're not gullible. They're not stupid. They're just scumbags. The enthusiasm doesn't stop at the Canadian borders. Around the world, 31 countries, including Canada, the United States, have joined the declaration. So what? They declare lots of things. Stemming from United Nations Conference, COP 29, Conference of Parties 29, right? We covered it. To triple global nuclear energy capacity by 2050 is absurd to suggest it could. And many have cited climate change. We've seen this continuous cycle of that particular propaganda. Is there a single show that we've done where we don't have that multiple times? Those exact phrases from all these different medias? Endless medias. Thousands and thousands. I don't know how many medias we cover each year. Probably 10,000. At least. And you can't fixate on either one of them because 2 minutes from now we're started on another one, right? They're going to be doing the exact same stuff to us. So there's a horrifying agenda, a frightening, out of control of agenda that's sanctioned and is only allowed to exist because all the universities and all the media participate in it. If there's any dissenting voices, they need to be stamped out because that's a problem, right? So it's all leading to what has been dubbed a nuclear renaissance. But if that was a journalist, the journalist would have said clearly there's no nuclear renaissance. Right? And what we're doing is something that doesn't really exist anymore. It's forensic investigative journalism, where we're able to dissect and challenge their lies with facts. We only deal in facts. No conjectures, no opinions. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, a chicken-egged size amount of uranium fuel, a chicken-egged size, so that's quite bigger, right, than the little pellets. They're going to show you those little pellets like that. But it's actually much bigger. That's not a chicken egg size pellet. So a chicken egg size amount of uranium fuel can provide as much electricity as 88 tons of coal. But you got to get it out of the mine, and these are huge facilities. These are massive. Let me bring up some of it. It's just perpetual lies with these people. You can't actually keep up with the lies, can you? I can. That's so sad. That's how long we've been doing it. I can keep up with their lies. Okay, give me a second. I get set up. Here we go. We're there. I got that pink hydrogen running through my brain all the time. Gonna have to pick up the guitar and get it out of me head, I suppose. So let's think of it this way. Let's go back and look at the legacy of nuclear. Some of the legacy of nuclear. To kind of flush this out. So it has to go through an amazing process, but let me show you what some of this looks like. To get rid of the waste for the first 50 years, they would go out in the ocean and just dump it in the ocean. And of course, as these barrels get down a couple of atmospheres, like 60 feet, 100 feet, they crush, right? And the ends of them, which are pressed down, will fall off. And they're just driving along. You can see the ships, they're always driving along. And they'll literally drop it on the protesters. They got to get it off the ship because they're getting massive doses. Right? And you don't see that in these particular models. You don't get the big picture. One of the interesting ones was in Japan. After 7 years, this story, and I remember when this story came out, a lot of you probably remember it. Fukushima residents visit family grave. What made that spectacular was that was the first time in 7 years they can go back to the graveyard. But why would you go back to that graveyard? It's a nuclear wasteland. It's a nuclear wasteland where they picked up 30 million of these 1 ton bags of radiation, just 3% of the year. There's 150,000 sites like that where they were storing 1 ton bags of radioactive fallout scraped up from topsoil. They spend decades and decades and decades just dumping it in the ground. And then the result of dumping it in the ground is you contaminated the water everywhere they showed up. You contaminated the water because all of this breaks down right away. And in this case here, they're actually putting rotten barrels in the ground. Another interesting thing that don't get taken into consideration when you look at the processing was that this is each of these dots is where they had missile silos. These were in farmers' field. They're going to be hemorrhaging tritium-3H, by the way, into that food that's grown. But each of these little dots, if Russia or China, whoever the next boogeyman is, attacked one of these missile silos, they wouldn't have said. The media would have all came up to one time and says, they attacked our little tiny community with a nuclear bomb. Are we going to sit and take it, or are you going to get behind us and send your kids to war? They wouldn't say they attacked a missile silo that was out in the farmer's field. And what they were doing were by putting the missile silos in all these little communities all over the country. There was 55,000 at one point. Each of those communities were human shields, basically. The only way to describe it, nuclear, is insane. They're insane, right? This is a person who went back to her hometown. When you look at how the mining, just to get the yellow cake out of the ground, because we're trying to quantify their statement that you can get as much electricity as 88 tons of coal from an egg size, which is a handful size, a fistful of pellets. it is equal to 88 tons of coal. But the reality of it is, after 14 months, you got to take it out of the reactor because it's very fragile. And you only use that best 3% of its energy, which left 97% of the energy, which is pulsing and splitting atoms for millions of years into your environment with no containment. Once you take it out of the reactor, there's no longer any containment. So, like, to get that out of the ground, they got to use huge, massive... They basically got to fill up... I think those trucks will hold about 200 tons or something. And so each of those will basically produce one pellet. But that whole process is absurd. That whole process, just to get it to the nuclear power plant, where it's only going to work for 14 months, and then you got to store it for 1 billion years. And then if your power plant breaks down, you got to abandon it for 1 million years. So if you owned that supermarket, would you call nuclear carbon free or net zero or right? And they attack your kids. They lull your kids into complacency with their caricatures. Like Superman and Spider-Man and the Hulk were co-opted by the nuclear industry to indoctrinate your children, right? Hey, we got a caller. Perfect. Hey, James. Hey, buddy.
Hey, real quick, I
Take your time, man.
just came up,
No rush.
and it's totally on point. But someone just commented on one of my videos, and they said it's that last one I did, exploiting nuclear ignorance, which is all about it's all about making weapons.
Yeah.
That's all this is for. So he says, I disagree with you. My dad worked on nuclear plants for 34 years. In terms of sources of power, they're pretty safe. We had 13 people die nationwide in 80 years. I don't know where this is.
Sounds like Rod Adams.
Especially given other major options to do the job for base load are coal and oil. That is a drop in the bucket. You may know more than I do. Let's have a discussion. So I'm like, all right. And this is what, and I just want, this is all from you. This is the education that we get from you, Dana, and it's just like what you say about debating. So I said,
They got no chance of beating you.
geothermal. So I say, geothermal is the most, is the major option we have. It's about energy production. But nuclear is all about weapons production. It's all in plain sight. This is why we don't have thorium reactors that are safer, because they don't produce the byproducts needed to replenish warheads.
Yeah.
There's nothing at all clean about nuclear. That's the guys, because it's all focused at the facade when it's in so-called operation.
Yes.
Yet the fuel
Excellent.
cycle, mining, waste disposal, enriching uranium, plus how nuclear doesn't run on its own power, needs external plants to run all the pumps and everything else.
Love
Those
it.
plants are always usually coal gas plants. So it was about actually generating energy.
That's a beatdown,
Nobody
actually.
in the right mind to use nuclear, except they need the byproduct.
Yes.
They come up with things to make people believe nuclear is the only option we have for the future. We still have the Price-Anderson Act of 1957 enabled to allow the nuclear industry to use the taxpayers to bail out if anything goes wrong. It's immunity, just like big pharma. Also, nuclear energy is the most expensive. It requires the best of the best materials. Plants can never be decommissioned. They need to have to keep their spent fuel on site, and again, off-site power is needed from coal gas to power the spent fuel pools. Nuclear energy is like washing your hands and drying them in the dirt.
That's so awesome, man. Wow. It'd be so great if they would get into a debate. It'd be so great if they would actually listen to what you said and what the song says and debate that. Right? Why not debunk the song, right?
And I can't tell you, this isn't the first time. I had a friend of mine, his dad worked at a nuclear, and he put me on the phone. I talked to this guy for an hour. I told you what, he's like, Well, yeah, you got a point. I never thought of that. It's because you've
Yeah.
been brainwashed
Complacent,
these 34
yeah.
years, thinking this is the only way,
Yeah.
and you're never going to question.
Well, you're not allowed to question. You're very, very
Right.
discouraged from questioning.
They'll take away your security clearance. That's another thing.
And
You
on
need
top of that, now,
security clearance.
yeah, great point, actually.
So
The-
that's all. I just want to call in and chime in about
I love
this,
it.
'cause it's just
That was awesome, man.
totally on point. All right.
Okay,
All right,
buddy.
thank you, Dan.
Okay,
Let's talk.
love you, buddy. Take care, man. Good stuff. That's James Lucet, for those who are not aware. He's been at war just as long as I can remember now. I love it, man. I love it when people, they got a brain, uses it. Both active uranium mines in Canada are underground and use a variety of techniques, including in situ, where chemicals are pumped into the ground. Like, this is absurdness. How is uranium mined in Canada? They pump chemicals down on the ground to dissolve the ground, the soil, and then they extract the uranium up by pumping it up. This is just wicked, evil thing to do. It's an insidious thing to do. These are man-made chemicals, by the way. These are literally monsters that does this stuff. Who owns Saskatchewan Uranium? Two companies, active uranium mines in Canada, Cameco and the French multinational Nano. But TEPCO actually owns a chunk of a mine in British Columbia, Canada, right? TEPCO from Japan, based in Japan, has a small share of Cigar Lake mine, a small share in a massive Cigar Lake mine, which had that, which had their tailing pond with around 4 million tons collapsed and end up in the Fraser River and out into the Pacific. When that was 2015 or something. And a lot of people say they allowed it to happen to get rid of the responsibility. And the Fraser River, of course, was the Hell Gates is up there. But that's a major sturgeon breeding ground, right? And salmon, sockeye salmon. The uranium itself, however, is technically owned by the province, which collects royalties for mining. Yeah, the Canadian government has been co-opted and now taken over since the 50s by the nuclear industry through the Secrecy Act. And they had spies spying on the scientists, and then during the Manhattan era, they had spies spying on the spies spying on the scientists, and they had spies spying on the spies that were spying on the spies that were spying on the scientists. And these were very secretive. They had a huge amount of money every year allocated to them, and they never went away. They're still there today. And their job is to keep the fear alive and put the nuclear industry on a pedestal. What they've done to Canada is horrifying. Canada is not a real country. Like I say, it removed all restrictions from the nuclear wasteland after 93 days, while 55 countries banned it for over a decade. TEPCO Resources, based in Japan, has a share of Cigar Lake mine, which is Cameco. And Nano, which is French, which bankrupted, replaced Areva, right? In France, Areva went bankrupt, so they didn't have to fulfill their obligations for the fuel for the next 100 million years. And then they just restarted up the next day in the same building with the same telephone number and called themselves Nano. And they done it because it's the French government. They can do whatever they want. Who's gonna stop them, right? The province saw massive increased exports to the European Union 2023 from Canada, particularly to Germany. Because despite the fact that Germany closed all their nuclear plants down last year, at the end of 22, December the 31st, 2022, right? So they don't have reactors. They're still making fuel in Germany. All Americans' fuel is imported in on top of that, right? So that's why this is apparently important. The CEO of Cameco, the disgusting little maggot, Tim Gitzel, we've covered it many, many times, the piece of shit that he actually is. In 2023 and 24 budget year, the Saskatchewan government received approximately $90 million from uranium mining, down from its forecast of $122 million. Because they get a royalty, right? The government noted expenditures for the Ministry of the Environment and Natural Resources was $76 million higher, primarily due to an increase in liability associated with the remediation of the Superfund mine sites, including Lorado and the Gunnar uranium mine, which is up by Uranium City, which is closed down because everybody got sick, and the Anglo Royal base metal mines, because they had changed. It was another company took over the original owner. Like other industrial sites, and uranium mines are not like other industrial sites. They're way worse in every shape and form. Uranium mines carry costly cleanup bills. Like there was a video out there today, and they were trying to demonize solar power panels, and they were saying, because every once in a while you got to use water just to rinse off the solar panels, right? And if it's out in the desert and stuff like that. And he was like, see, they use all kinds of water. They were just driving along the truck spraying water. It wasn't very much, and it was washing the panels clean. But a single reactor is using 4,500 tons every minute. It's 1 million gallons a minute. These sites would use 1 million gallons a year. For the solar panel, nuclear sites are using 1 million gallons a minute per reactor. And so I commented it on and told him that, right? But I know it's because it's the industry, it doesn't matter. But for anybody that happened to come by before they took the comment down and read it, like other industrial sites, uranium mines carry costly cleanup bills. It's not like any industrial site. It's the nuclear is just most of the Superfund sites in North America are the nuclear industry. The cleanup costs for the decommissioned, well, if it was decommissioned, you wouldn't need all the money. In northern Saskatchewan are estimated at $280 million, paid for by the federal and provincial governments. They're not paid for by the federal and provincial governments. What are you talking about? Paid for by the taxpayers. Any money they got is the taxpayers' money. So the people that created the pollution, again, as usual, don't clean it up. The taxpayers are stuck with it, and they're left to be poisoned for 50 years, because that was closed since 1965, I think. And Gunnar mined, they had around 4.9 million short tons of mining tailing, uranium tailing left over. This is nasty stuff, right? The mine ceased production in 1963, actually. And Uranium City, now, because there's a connection, see? And the Gunnar Mine Part 1. They built this city, because we talked about Port Uranium before, right? By Port Hope. Port Uranium. What a disgusting name. But they make some interesting stuff here. Radium, an incredibly precious mineral at the time, was considered the only cure for cancer. They also put it in chocolates too, right? Here in Canada. But now we know it's lethal. They knew back then it was lethal. Madame Curie knew it was lethal. She lost both of her hands to it. They gave her 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, but she couldn't pick them up because she lost both of her hands to the radium. So it was incredible, and we talked about this just a few weeks ago, wasn't it? Incredible precious mineral. It's not a mineral. It's a very carcinogenic monster. It's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. At the time, considered the only cure for cancer. And of course, it wasn't a cure for cancer. It murdered everybody they gave it to. They had, and let's just take a quick look at that. Actually, radium. I mean, if that doesn't make you sick, what will? To have the incredible arrogance to put that there without putting in the fact that it wasn't the cure for cancer. The cure for cancer is stay the frig away from radiation. And DCA. Bear with me. Radium, incredible precious metal. The industry is insane, eh? They really are insane. Just bear with me. I'll show you some of this stuff here. Actually, let's do this. Here we go. They were using uranium, right? Uranium chocolate. Radium chocolate. They had radium-infused jugs, and when you pour water and it become radioactive water and you would drink it, eventually your jaw would fall off, and that's how they went out of business. They had radium hand cream. They had radium lipstick, radium eyeshadow, radium makeup, radium toothpaste, radium suppositories. The most insane thing conceivable is the radium foot warmer. Man, these people are literally monsters. This is literally the probably the most monstrous thing I've ever saw. Well, besides the radium razor blades, radium makeup, the radium lipstick they targeted to kill children with. And they had all these trinkets for like necklaces that were radium infused for children to put around their neck. And you know what they were doing the entire time? They said, here's to your health. They made it into chocolate. But this one was insane. Radium spray. Combination bug killer, disinfectant, furniture polish. And the list is very long. Will kill all insects and vermins or your money back. So, liquid cleaner and polisher, dust layer, disinfectant, deodorizer, assured death to everybody that used it, including flies, mosquitoes, roaches, bed bugs, fleas, hog. Will polish and clean furniture, buggies, automobiles. This is why I won't go near an antique furniture, antique automobiles, or anything else. Because radium is not going away for 50,000 years. It's got a 5,000 year plus half-life. Stay away from antiques. Cash registers, typewriters. Use it on polish and clean furniture, buggies, automobiles, marble, tile, brass. And they did. They sold a ridiculous amount of this stuff. And people were just using their bare hands in a cloth. And, you know, like you're always touching your face. And a lot of times the kids were doing it. And the industry, this is the legacy of the industry. It knew what it was doing. It loved it. It was using it. Doctors say stops agony. Like, these were, and this is unconscionable that they even done a single one of these on them. But when they made these radium sprays, liquid cleaner and polisher, I can't even imagine how you got to, because you know the difference. I can't imagine the incredible, brutal, catastrophic harm that they caused to everybody by doing that. And radium chocolate, Canada in particular was doing that. And then radium water, they had all kinds of... finally, there was a millionaire who lost his jaws, rotted off from the... He was buying this and drinking it all the time. Like you drink Coca-Cola or something. He was drinking this stuff. You say radium makeup, radium suppositories, radiator toilet. And you see all the different stuff there, makeup and perfume, radium. Like this is some sick stuff. You got to. This industry is sadistic, and the people, the inbreeds of the inbreeds that are currently in charge, are the legacy of this radium. What does a nuclear renaissance mean for uranium mining in Saskatchewan? Drew Anderson, one of the most soulless journalists you'll ever come across. United States nuclear generators import nearly all the uranium concentrates that they use. Well, it's just as well to have it all, because it's just shy of it all, isn't it? The U.S. nuclear generators use 32 million pounds of imported uranium concentrates. Like they will muddle that line, and every sentence. There's nothing they won't do to try to downplay it, is it? Imports accounted for 99% of the uranium-308 they used in 2023 to make a nuclear fuel. And that the process of making a nuclear fuel, we covered these facilities. Like, it's absurd. The people that are making it are they're complacent too. Right? They get lead sheets and put it on the floor where they're standing up. Too stupid to quit their jobs, see? The U.S. Department of Energy recently received $2.7 billion congressional funding to help revive domestic fuel production for commercial nuclear power plants. 90% of the money goes to administration on top of that. 90% of the money goes to administration. Nano nuclear. I guess here comes the next Ponzi scheme for the next couple of weeks again. Every 2 or 3 weeks, Nano Nuclear, New Scale, Cameco will run a advertising blitz. And the 14 biggest financial institutions worldwide, since Conference of Parties 29 last year, will buy stocks in the small modular reactor companies like Nano and NuScale, and they'll buy millions of them. And so it looks on paper like the stock is flying through the air, right? And they'll come out and like it. Nano nuclear energy shares are climbing higher after contract for micro reactors. They don't have an application into the regulatory agencies. They don't have a site to build a reactor. They're not trying to build a reactor. They don't have a license to build a reactor. They don't have an approved design. They're decades away, even if everything goes perfect, from fruition of an experimental reactor. They're going to have to run for years to get the kinks out of it and then redesign it and come up with the money, rebuild a new reactor in one of the national laboratories. But every 2 or 3 weeks we see this same scam. Right, because they just dumped all the stocks after New Year's. They started the Ponzi scheme again, and it takes a few weeks. And now once the stocks rise up like this, mom and pop investors who actually worked all their life are going to start buying the stocks because they see it skyrocketing right out of the blue, and they're going to jump on that bandwagon. And then the big 14 financial institutions, as they do every 2 or 3 weeks, will sell off their stocks. And they'll take the money that mom and pop just invested. They wait a week or two, then they'll start the whole advertising campaign and promote and artificially inflate the stocks again. Over and over and over. And there's no checks and balances to hold them accountable. And they're robbing all the most vulnerable people on the planet. People that actually worked all their life. Small modular reactor developers like Nano Nuclear. Well, how can you call them a small modular reactor developer when they don't even have a license into the regulatory agency? They don't have a design. They're not trying to build it. They don't have the team together. They don't have the supply chain. They're not buying material. They don't acquire land. There's no indication that there's literally, after 80 years, And the regulatory agencies are the ones that are buying the shares after 2 weeks to steal mom and pops who worked their whole life. U.S. Nuclear Consultancy to begin major study of the potential of clean hydrogen, pink hydrogen. Hydrogen produced by reactors, also known as pink hydrogen, could support repurposing of existing gas networks. Yeah, hydrogen can, but nuclear hydrogen is the dirtiest way to produce hydrogen. It's the worst way. It's the most resource-intensive way to produce hydrogen. Period. And here they are trying to dress it up and sugarcoat it, put lipstick on a pig, and it's still a pig, right? Could support repurposing of existing gas. There is no such thing as green or clean nuclear anything. Nuclear is your biggest enemy. It's the enemy. The biggest enemy of humanity is nuclear power. Well, it's radioactive fallout from 1,000 fuel pools that are splitting atoms with no containment into the environment every day. And the amount we're talking about, you are not escaping it anywhere on the planet. It's always present now. And then the Americans use the word net zero. So the study has been commissioned by Northern Gas Networks, the gas distributor for the north of England, Wales, West Utilities. A gas and gas pipeline service is being supported for the not-for-profit Energy Innovation Center. Whenever I hear the word not-for-profit in the nuclear, that's the industry, that's the lobbying groups. That's their dark money companies, right? Where they start up a company, they throw all this money into this company, and it invests the money instead of the big companies that are under scrutiny all the time, see? Coming soon to a port near you, floating nuclear plants. Well, the academic up in Russia, northern Russia, the only ones on the planet, just changed the fuel. And guess where they're keeping it? On the academic, on the barge. Right there in that community, there's no containment. So all those atoms are piped right into the Arctic. The last pristine spot on the planet now is being saturated every day with emissions from spent fuel pools on and they call it, what was they call it, a storage room. They didn't want to call it a pool. You can't take the fuel out of the reactor and put it in a room. It has to go in a pool. It's zirconium cladding. If you expose it to air, it'll light up like a firecracker immediately. It'll burn at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures, and that'll ignite the zirconium-cladded uranium plutonium pellets. And in that in the academic, they're actually using plutonium mixed oxide fuel, right? They're not using your typical nightmarish fuel for a nuclear reactor. They're using plutonium mixed oxide fuel from Mayak. And now they took it out after, 2 years? And now it's in a fuel pool. So they have to replenish a massive amount of water every day because it's going to boil off and release insidious amounts. So, if you were to do studies in the next 3 years, you're going to see a massive increase of heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia, death. A massive increase in every population. And same thing for the species for 1,000 square miles. Coming soon to a port near you. That disgusting, despicable British startup. We've covered them a few times. Seattle-based, the Seattle nuclear companies why are they such scumbags all the time? Why are they such fucking degenerates all the time, I wonder? The announcement comes as nuclear power is increasingly being considered to address electrical demand that is expected to skyrocket thanks to power-hungry artificial intelligence. So we should poison our entire planet and every species, every human, so that we can create an artificial intelligence to destroy everything else. Yeah, we deserve to be hit by a big fucking meteorite anyway. Many see nuclear as an optimal boost to its low emissions. Anything small modular reactors or nuclear can do, geothermal can do it better, and it can do it this year. Not in 14, 15, 16, 17 years and $50 billion later, but right away, at next to nothing, at 5,000 a megawatt, $5 million a megawatt, rather. That number is from like 6 years ago, by the way. It's much cheaper now, but even then, it's infinitely cheaper than nuclear per megawatt. A megawatt will power 1,000 homes. You can't call nuclear low emissions. It's the worst emissions. Its emissions are invisible plumes that covers the entire planet within 30 days, and it's continuous as long as the plant exists, the fuel pool exists. And it's an invisible plume like a snowstorm covering the entire planet, where the snow never melts, the snow never goes away, never stops snowing. Except this stuff has that same attributes. It's radioactive fallout, and it pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. It never stops producing heat, and it bioaccumulates in the biosphere and the ecosystem. And you. Opposition to nuclear waste facility. They don't even put the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. They don't put Canada in the headline. You have no indication that this is a Canadian story whatsoever. Opposition to nuclear waste facility at ground level. Like it's so vague. The headline is so vague. You're purposely not trying to attract any attention, see? Nuclear power producers, and here's why. Nuclear power producers want to put spent fuel rods below the ground near Ignis, which is northern Ontario. We covered that quite a bit when it was happening and when they made the announcement a few months ago. Local journalism initiative. So you got to be pro-nuclear or you can't get the initiative royalties, I guess. Some grassroots groups continue to oppose the idea. Some grassroots groups. Some people with a conscience, you mean? Some humans like me, but not like you mean? Right, they immediately got to label them, right? Some fringy grassroots groups, some conspiracy theorists. Oppose the idea. Again, this goes back to the way they framed the headline. There was no way to appreciate what they're talking about. There's lots of nuclear waste facilities, but there's no deep geological repositories. So a nuclear waste facility is completely different than a deep geological repository. Wednesday, and so what was the date of this story? Wednesday. So they came out with the story on Wednesday that there was going to be a meeting. But it didn't come out till that night. That story didn't, because I got that story that night after the show. Which was basically Thursday when the story came out. To tell you that there's a meeting on Wednesday for anti-nuclear. But you never know when you read the headline what the hell it was in the first place, would you? The Nuclear Waste Info Night. Nuclear Waste Info Night. They really should have got me up there, shouldn't they? Billed as a chance to chat with regional activists. Was primarily organized by Nietzsche and Dupus. And I apologize if I butcher anybody's name, but that's all I'm really good at sometimes. A member of the Ojibwe nations of Soggy, northwest of Savant. I gotta butcher names whenever it comes to. The First Nations people along the transportation route and downstream were excluded from the decision making. Well, radiation is not so what's going to happen is they're going to transport the nuclear waste allegedly to northern Ontario, the fuel rods, and you can't put that in the containment. It has to be vented. It might be a 50,000 pound container, but it's vented because the fuel is still splitting atoms, and that's the problem. This is why it's dangerous. It's splitting atoms, and so these highways are full of farms on both sides. And there's thousands and thousands of freshwater lakes in that area. Thousands and thousands. So you're talking about a massive aquifer underneath all of that, right? That's their old shit plan always. That's always the old shit plan you see with this industry. First Nations who used the Revel Lake area, where the deep geological repository could get built, to exercise their rights were also excluded, like from Eagle Lake First Nation. Oh, well, the First Nations are the target. The indigenous populations worldwide are the targets of the nuclear industry, aren't they? There's 15,000 abandoned uranium mines and tailing ponds and chemical ponds in the Navajo nations. Abandoned. And the accidents that they had there with the tailing ponds has destroyed the health of all the natives in the Navajo nation, which is not their real name. Navajo is not their real name. I can't remember the real name off the top of my head. That was the name that the oppressive nuclear industry gave them. And you know what? The Nuclear Waste Management Organization had 15 years to get consent from the affected First Nations, and they completely failed. Well, it's worse than that. They had $26 billion for 22 years. They didn't grow any interest on it. So what were they doing? They grew interest on it, but even today it's still $26 billion. I can tell you something right now. If I got $26 billion and I'm the government, I can grow a lot of interest on it, guaranteed, right? Safe investments every year. And I would probably triple that by now, no problem at all. And that includes inflation. And so they're at least 40 years away from putting anything in the ground right now. Allegedly, because digging a hole in the ground. Why did they need to do it in the community? Because they knew it would cause these controversies, right? And would delay it. They don't want to put it. They don't want to put it anywhere. They want it. They can't because it's still splitting atoms into your communities, into your farmlands, into your drinking water, into your schools, and into your communities, into your biosphere, into your ecosystem, and into the biota and your forest. This is why we're not seeing the foliage and the litter breaking down anymore, because you killed the biota and all the forest, and the ground's not sucking up water anymore. This is why you're seeing all the flash floods, and the trees are so dry, the soil is so dry. This is why you're seeing the forest fires. The Nuclear Waste Management Organizations, after 80 years, you wrecked the planet now, see? The Non-Waste Management Organization, regional spokesperson, that piece of shit, that low-life scumbag, what's his name? I got his headlines there. I'm not going to go dig it up right now, but yeah, let's bring it up anyway for badness. Next thing you know, I'll start getting lazy. Oh, he's too lazy to go do it. Dana finally lost it. He's getting too lazy. Let me see here. Nuclear Waste Management Organization. Yeah, you little scumbag. Yeah, Vince Ponca. Vince the Monster, as everybody up there knows him, I guess. Vince. Nuclear Waste Non-Waste Management Organization responds to Land Defense Alliance. Read that story. Vince Ponca. So he attempts to dispel concerns surrounding the Deep Geological Repository project. So they were talking about, let me get to it. They were talking about on the highway, we're going to bring the fuel rods up. And Vince was saying, no one has ever been harmed in Canada or around the world by used nuclear fuel. That's something James was talking about a minute ago. That's an unbelievable lie, by the way. Everybody's harmed. If you eat food from within 1,000 miles of a nuclear plant, you got instant harm and it's permanent. Radiation harms are permanent. Once it goes in your body, your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. If that's not permanent, what is? It eventually builds a tumor around it. Even if it's a single atom, you put 50 million atoms or 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. You get a single one of these anthropogenic man-made atoms in your body. Even though used nuclear fuel is classified as a dangerous good along with many other things on the road, there's nothing worse than nuclear. And we're talking about fuel, nuclear fuel. Fuel. That if you took a little 1/3 the size of this cup of the fuel and put it in the wall of McDonald's. Everybody goes in there would die within 20 minutes. See, 200 people every 20 minutes go in there, they all died. And you can do that for 1 million years. And Vince says if you have an accident, it's a lot safer than other goods that are already transported on our highways, he says, which is absurd to suggest. Just drive. If it's driving this way at 60 miles an hour, you're driving at 60 miles an hour, you're getting multiple full body x-rays just running past that at 60 miles per hour. But we're only talking about a piece this big on the side of the road. That would be the animosity equivalent. The trucks can't shield you, right? The benefit of dealing with the uranium is because it's solid and it's easy to find. If you dump it on the road, it ignites immediately. You can find it from a helicopter because the helicopter won't go near it. It's very easy to collect, he said, and put back into the container. Like if fuel rods spill out on the highway, there's nobody going to pick it up and put it back in the container. It doesn't work that way. It's a lethal dose immediately. You can't get near it. It's a lethal dose forever. That's why you got to put it thousands of feet underground for 1 million years. And so Vince Ponca, one of the most worthless scumbags on the entire planet. There's no shortage of them. That's the problem, isn't it? The Labour Minister agreed with the Nuclear Commission Authority to dump 140 tons of nuclear waste currently stored at Sellafield, Columbia, under the sea. This guy here. Ed Miliband has been told he has thrown away a gold mine because plutonium, one time they were going to replace gold with plutonium for a currency. Didn't I say earlier I wasn't going to do a long show tonight? Once you start talking about this subject, it's so horrifying, eh? But anyway, long story short was Ed Miliband said the government is going to put 140 tons of plutonium, which is named after the devil, by the way. Plutonium. Just let me explain plutonium. I got a neat way of doing that one too. That's sadness. I've been at this so long. I got a neat way to explain almost everything about nuclear at this stage. I've been at it for so long. It sucks. The world should be fighting back. There we go. Get lucky this. There we go. I got you, baby. This is actually really important what I'm going to show you. This was studies from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, which is the U.S. Navy's research institute. Dr. Raymond Gilmet is one of the lead researchers there. And he's got 90-something studies on beagle dogs and beagle puppies. Who knows how he gets his hands on all of them. But they're sacrificed typically. But this particular study was 144 beagle dogs, and they were allowed to live out their life. They were given one single monodispersal inhalation because a beagle dog got a big nose on it, right? And they're not likely to attack you. They're pretty docile dogs. And so the scientists are not worried about getting bitten because that's what cowards would do anyway. Death from radiation occurred about 1.5 to 5.4 years after the single exposure of plutonium. And tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and the liver occurred beginning about 3 years after exposures. Bone tumors found in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death. And liver tumors in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 dogs. So typically it was 3 tumors. And the bone tumors were the 93 dogs out of 144 dogs. The biggest, and I don't know if you know anything about bone tumors, that's a nasty way to die. So these dogs were left to suffer like you wouldn't believe. And then they make this suggestion, or this assertion, that these findings in dogs suggest a similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed. Well, accidentally exposed. Everybody's exposed to the plutonium fallout from Fukushima. Everybody. Just let me find one of the plutonium studies based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. There you go. Because this is kind of important. So this is plutonium-239 dispersal based on 20 days up there covering the whole planet. Okay. Now remember what plutonium does. It killed all the dogs of multiple tumors. But it turns out it was discovered that the human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys at removing plutonium. So we're 50 times more vulnerable than the dogs, and every dog died in the study of multiple tumors. But, and plutonium is definitely something to worry about, but the biggest model, the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods, done by the same institutions in Albuquerque, New Mexico, curium isotopes are the major byproduct of the radiated nuclear fuel. And forget the fact they're the significant fraction of alpha emitting radionuclide for a second. It's very important, by the way. But forget that for a second. They're the biggest byproduct of the irradiated fuel. Is an alpha emitter. And that needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than the plutonium did. And you can see what the plutonium done to all the animals, right? Isn't nuclear fun? Aren't you having fun yet? And again, you see this connotation of a willingness. Potentially, community has confirmed its willingness. This is the same narrative we heard here in Canada for the non-waste management organization in Ontario. And a willing community, the willingness. And of course, the native communities only voted to allow them to continue to survey the area, not for a deep geological repository. And we covered all of that, right? These are such complicated stories, unfortunately, right? The average person has no hope of working it out on their own because they're going to get led down the perpetual road of lies that the industry, the trap that the industry has set for it. The perpetual trap of lies. Absurd censorship tonight. My last show of the week is always censored heavily. Last night was brutal. That was a great show last night. And tonight's a really good show, if I do say so myself, where I didn't lose it too many times. That's how I define a good show, where I don't lose it too many times. I should lose it every second of my rights, though. And we got a meager. Thank God I've been doing this for a decade. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have this many views, I suppose. We got 19 viewers and 18 likes. 18 likes at the end of my almost 2-hour show. 18 votes at the end of almost 2-hour show. That's ridiculous, right? And because they done that to me tonight, we're going to have this poll for the next 2 months as retaliation for the censorship. In fact, forever. I might keep this poll forever now. I'll change up a bit here and there for something to do, but it's basically going to be that poll now forever for doing that to me tonight. At least for the rest of the year, anyway. Let me see here. Let me get out of here for a second. Let's go over and check and see if James got any new songs up. You never know, I get lucky. I know he's working on one, but no. So because we were talking about pink hydrogen, we're going to play that song tonight. Let's bring up James' site there. James Lucet. You'll see him in the comments section. You'll also find links under my video. And you'll find some of his videos in a playlist that I got to get fixed up. The playlist, just because I don't put every song in these playlists, that doesn't mean it's not a fantastic song. It just means I'm stupid and don't get things done that I should do. So pink hydrogen, we were talking about how nuclear making pink hydrogen. James put out an amazing song. I'm going to stop it. Hang on. I'm going to restart that here in a sec. Let me just go high quality as soon as I got it stopped. We'll see everybody on Sunday night unless there's something else pops up tomorrow or the next day. We had snow today. It got warm again. Now we got more snow this evening and tonight. And it's starting to gather up. It's minus 20 out there now or something. And so the long range now is brutal weather. Excellent. We got to get out and do some research on the skidoo, look for some species, set up some cameras and stuff like that. We're going to get busy, and when we go, we'll be at it quite a lot. So there'll be a lot of that footage coming out. It's just I want to be able to take a lot of equipment with me, and I'm trying to find a reasonable sled, something not too crazy price, because a lot of these sleds, the good ones, are very expensive, right? And so if I'm going to be out in the woods, I got to be able to take a generator and sleeping bags and survival gear with me each time, because it's not like summertime. You're out on the quad. You're out in minus 20 degree temperatures. And if you break down and you got no cell phone, you're in real trouble, right? 264 chems per minute. These are frightening numbers in my Geiger counter. We'll see everybody on the next show. And I'll stop the poll. Give us another couple of votes on the poll. My God, I got no votes on the poll. No votes on the video. We're almost 2 hours in the show. Scumbag nuclear. But this is Pink Hydrogen's song, anti-nuclear song. James is the master now, worldwide, of anti-nuclear music. And he makes all the videos and the music. So he's using AI, but he's producing it. AI can't do it on his own. So he's the brains behind it. We'll see everybody on the next show. Hugs for everybody. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Oops, I had the audio turned off. Sorry. Let's try it again. I'll get there.
They say it's clean, just in bright light, but beneath the gloss, there's nothing right.
They say it's safe, they say it's pure, nuclear reborn, that's the cure. Wrapped up tight in pastel tones, hide the flaws, mask the bones.
Georgian horse wrapped in gloss.
Look real close, there's danger there.
They say it's safe, they say it's pure.
Painted pink, they laugh and cheer. Trust us, nothing to fear. Fuel rods turn, the cycle spins. While they cash out, everyone grins.
Sure, it's all safe here.
But the cost they won't make clear.
They say it's fake, they say it's pure.
Painted pink, they laugh and cheer. Trust us, nothing to fear. Fuel rods turn, the cycle spins. While they cash out, everyone grins.
Sure, it's all safe here.
But the cost they won't make clear. So call it pink and mask the stain. Paint over waste, dismiss the pain. Keep the cycle, keep the game. Disguise the threat, shift the blame.
Trojan tricks and faces bright.
Tell us lies wrapped up in light.
Only keep the game, shift the blame. It's painted pink, it's all a show.
Pink hydrogen wrapped up need. Nuclear is tricked, disguised is clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds.
A Trojan gift, dressed in a lie. A polished mask for what's alright. The future's here, they say it's bright, but hidden deep it's not so light. They say it's bright, they say it's bright. Say it's bright.
Pink hydrogen wrapped up need. Nuclear is tricked, disguised is clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds.
They sell us dreams, they paint it bold, but what's hidden there is cold. A polished face, a crafted guise. Pink hydrogen, their perfect lie. Their perfect lie. What's this, what's left inside? A future built on what they hide.
mask the stain. Paint over waste, dismiss the pain. Keep the cycle, keep the game. Disguise the threat, shift the blame. Rhythm tricks and faces bright. Tell us lies wrapped up in light. The cycle, keep the game. Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat. Nuclear's trick, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat. Nuclear's trick, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. They sell us the paint, the dirt white. Love the difference, the gloss, there's nothing white. They sell us dreams, they paint it bold, but what's hidden there is cold. A polished face, a crafted guise, pink hydrogen, their perfect lie. Their perfect lie. A massless. What's left inside a future built on what they hide. Hydrogen wrapped up neat. Nuclear's trick, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat. Nuclear's trick, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat. Nuclear's trick, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. A Trojan gift, dressed in a lie. A polished mask for what's awry.